Welcome back, Linux enthusiast. This is the 11th episode of our Linux learning series. If you have missed any of our previous episodes, here's the playlist link. In this video, we'll be talking about various file transfer mechanisms and the firewalls available in the Linux systems. If you're looking to upskill in Linux and get globally recognized certificates, then I would suggest to check out our DevOps course. The link is given in the description below. Alright, so let's start the video now. So let's talk about the file transfers. What are the ways to transfer the file from a remote machine to the client machine? As we have already discussed about SSH, so we'll be using SCP. SCP is nothing but it uses SSH under the hood in order to transfer the file from a remote server to the client machine or from the client to remote. There is another utility called SFTP, which is more interactive in terms of transferring files, and you can run things on shell. So it's kind of an interactive shell. It provides you that platform where you can copy from location 1 to location 2, as well as you can interactively execute commands like ls or pwd and stuff, right? So you can do on the way shell, interactive shell itself. So that's what SFTP give. Then rsync is another command that we'll be talking about, which will be more of syncing the directories and files both. Then we'll be talking about some firewalls and security stuff, for example UFW and iptables. So you can see here iptables is kind of a way to basically secure your services and secure your communications to the services. So it's kind of an additional security. For example, do you want to allow people to access your website and for what port, and you want to block connections from a particular port and IP address, you can do all such of securities. So these are the files you can see in the PPT that there are rules. You should always save the rules in order to reuse them or export and import, so you can use any of it. And then best practices also I have written here. We can start with the UFW starting, and then because UFW is the front end of your IP tables, and whatever the changes you do via UFW will be stored in the IP tables itself. So we can see that. So yeah, let's talk about syncing first and see how does SCP and SFTP works. So let me go to my machine. This is my client, this is my server machine. Let me log in. Okay. Yeah. So let's check if we have any SCP SSH setup here. So we have already discussed that SSH in the previous chapter, right? So we have seen SSH is already there. And let's try to rebrush our skills where we copy from a remote to the client machine. So let me also log into the client machine as well. Okay. So I'm currently logged in with SSH testing SSH user, which we'll be using for sharing the contents of the files and stuff. So let's rebrush this. So I'll just try to create a directory called testing. Okay, then I will create files inside testing.txt. Okay, let's do this way. Okay, and this is a testing file. Okay, and you can write anything to it, and then I will save it. Let's try to read the content of the file. Testing file1.txt. We have the contents over here. I want this file to be present on my remote server. So see, why do we need all these things is remember the use case. I'll just try to recall this and tell you. So what happens is usually whenever you make any modifications to the remote server, so when we say server, which means something which is publicly on the public internet serving something to the customers, right? So we don't want to touch any such configurations which can break certain things. So what we do is we always prefer to make changes locally on the machine, and then after that you can upload the changes to the server itself. So the better way to do it using these sync commands and two utilities, what it does is from the local machine, whatever you have already tested and stuff, and if it is running working fine for you, then you can just directly copy it over to the server. So just think like this. It's not like a journal file that we do copy over, but it's more of a configuration related stuffs, or more of something of a complex operations related to some sort of a service that we make changes, and those file we would want to copy it on the server. So that is a enterprise level use case, is what users do, right? So but here we are just seeing the testing how to do that. If you know how to copy over files from the remote location to the local, or from the local to remote locations, you can copy over any of the files, any configurations and stuff. So the pattern is same, the commands are same, it's just that the use cases I have told you about, how to, why do we need all these things. So let's try to copy this file. So we will use SCP. Okay, I'll use file1.txt, and after that let's say *agile, my user name on the remote machine. Let me just check the IP as well of my server. Okay, sure. Where did it go? Let's just try to see if it did go or not. It did not go, because usually we should see the bytes transferred message. So I'll just say here it'll ask for the password. Okay, permission denied. Okay, testing SSH. That okay. Yeah, the reason being we are trying to use user as *agile, which should not be the case. We should use user called as testing SSH, because from here, so the reason being you got this error because you were trying to do the SSH using *agile user, and you were trying to access the home directory of testing SSH user, which definitely should not be able to have the access, because we discussed in the permission chapters where usually a user who owns that home directory should be able to access it by default, otherwise root should be able to access it, but none other users are able to access the home directory of any other user. That's the reason you got this permission denied error. Now we'll correct the username and then try to transfer the file, and now you see file1.txt is 100% uploaded with a speed of 37 kbps in runtime, let's say milliseconds, and let's verify it here. I will switch to testing SSH. Okay, and let's see, file1.txt is present. Let's try to read the content. And yeah, there you go. You are able to successfully copy over the files from your client machine to the remote machine. Now let's try to do a use case where on the server you do certain modifications, or a file which you would want to modify locally. So how do you do that? You cannot just copy paste Control-C, Control-V from the remote to the local, right? So it's always recommendable to use commands like SCPs, a utility which let you download the file from the remote machine. Once you have downloaded, you can make the modification and then upload it back, right? So let's say I'll create a file called some configuration, let's say, config.yaml. Okay. App service v1 type manual host localhost and IP, say local IP, something like that. For example, I've just created a dummy config file. Okay, now I want this file to be copied over from the remote machine to the local machine. Basically, I'm just trying to download the file. So what I will do is test SCP testing SSH @ 25.12 config.yaml where you want to copy or download in the present directory. There it is. So it has successfully downloaded the config file. Now if you want to read it, you can just read it like this. So this is a use case we covered using SCP. Now let's talk about SFTP. So SFTP gives, like, it's kind of a FTP server which is more secure, which is using SSH under the hood. So that's the, so in usual enterprises, everybody uses FTP servers to download, or it creates a repository kind of a thing, and then from their repository you can wget the command to download the stuff, or you can put it via put command. So stuff like that you can perform. So we will set up SFTP server and see how to use it. So first of all, let's try to see if you have the SFTP created or not. So for that, SSH is mandatory, which means when I say SSH is mandatory, I meant open SSH hyphen server package should be there, since it is already downloaded, because we have already set up the SSH. That is good. Now after that, we will say verify if SSH service is running. Yes, it is running. That is good. All right. Now let's try to make some modifications which is required for SFTP to work. Okay. So what are the configuration which is required? One configuration is this one: match group SFTP users, chroot, and then force command. So this entry is needed because whenever you try to authenticate via SFTP user, so it requires this configuration so that you can log in via SFTP. So that is needed. Once you have done this, after that you can just save it. Okay, I'm not saving it because I already have this configuration in my machine. And after that, you need to make sure the SFTP group is created. So this is the group SFTP users. Let's verify. TC group. Okay, so SFTP users group is already being created on my server. Okay, that is good. If you have not created the group, then you have to use command sudo group add SFTP users. Okay, so you have to do this. After that, you have to do you have to create or modify a user called SFTP user and associate this user to this group. So if you remember or recall our group chapters where we talked about, this is nothing but a secondary group. So for SFTP user, the secondary group is SFTP users. Okay, if you have not done this configuration, so you have to make changes. Sudo user modify -m -g which group? SFTP users, and which shell you would want, bin sh or bin bash. Let's say I say bin bash, and then SFTP user. Okay, right. So sudo user mode. Okay, so this is for user add command. Since this user is already existing, so we can try to delete this del user. Okay, and now let's create this user again. Okay, so this is already exists because we did not delete the home directories and other files from that user. Not copying any files from Skell, or it's not copying any of the bash rc and profile files because it is already existing. That is fine, no worries. After that, once you do this, whenever, so this is the case when I already had the user and I deleted it without deleting the home directories and contents. But in case you don't have any user created for SFTP, you have to create a user. When you do this, you will not see all these warnings because you will be creating a fresh user in that case. So first we created the group. After that, we are creating a user and then modifying that user for the primary group called SFTP users. Okay, after that, let's change the password for passwd SFTP user. Okay, I'll set the password. Okay, password set. After that, you have to make some changes in the ownership of the SFTP user home directory. So you need to set the group ownership and user ownership and group ownership to root. Okay, that is done. After that, you have to change the permission as well, 755/home SFTP users. So you don't have to remember all these commands, the steps. You can just Google it up and then find the steps how to do this. It's just that the idea you should understand, what are we trying to do? Basically, we are trying to set up the ownership. We are trying to make permission changes 755, which means others should only be having permission to execute and read, because read is for 4 and execute means 1. Okay. After that, you create a directory called home SFTP. Let's see if you already have a directory. Since I already had the user created, so yeah, so you have to create a directory called uploads. Okay, so you can just do sudo mkdir and then the location and then uploads. Once you do that, after that you have to make the changes of the ownership. Sudo chown SFTP user SFTP users /home and uploads. Okay, now you want to verify, you can do this SFTP user and uploads. So you see, for dot, the ownership of this directory is SFTP user, the group ownership is SFTP users. Okay, and this user has a secondary group called this. Okay, so that, and it has some files and contents which I had already tested. That's the reason you are seeing this contents present already in the home directory. Okay, now let's restart systemctl restart SSH. So for SFTP, you don't have to, there is no particular service for SFTP, only SSH is required. So the open SSH server is the package which is mandatory or need to be installed. Once you do that, only changes you have to do is in the sshd_config file, you have to add an entry for SFTP. Then you have to create a user, and then you have to associate the user home directory with certain permissions and the ownership and the group ownership. Once you do that, after that you should be able to successfully execute or access the interactive shell of SFTP. Once you do that, let's try to do SFTP from the client machine. So let's log in and let's say SFTP storage child TP user okay. SFTP user it's saying permission denied. We will see in a bit. Let's try to log in from here. SFTP user @ one two. Okay, so from this machine I am able to connect to my SFTP server which is running on the same machine, and currently you see it saying connected, and this prompt you are seeing is for SFTP. Now if I do ls, I can see directory which I created previously. So this is basically accessing location /home /SFTP user /uploads, and let's go to uploads and then ls. You can see the files and contents present. So that is how interactively you can access. From the remote machine also you should be able to access. First let's just let's check if you are that should be fine actually. 55.12. okay, the connectivity is there. Okay, the spelling mistake is there. SFTP user. Yeah, now you're connected from the client machine to the remote server. So now you can access the same stuff and then read the contents from any of the client machine. So usually whenever, so it's kind of a repository. You can understand SFTP is a secure FTP. It's using FTP server, file transfer protocol, that server, for transferring the files from the remote to the local. But it is a good way where you can see the interactions. It has a prompt, it has a shell and stuff. You can execute commands. So this is the difference between normal SCP and the SFTP, because normal SCP does not give you such interactive shell prompts where you can execute ls commands on the remote server and then you try to download. So you should remember which file you want to download or which file you want to upload, right? But in this case you can see, oh yeah, there are 3 files, I want this file to be downloaded. So then you can just download this file, or you can put from your local thing. So let's say you want to download this test.txt to local machine. So then you can say /home/testing as such. Okay, see, from this machine SFTP, since we have already logged into the remote server, from the remote server, this file, I want to download the file to this location, home testing as such, and I'm able to fetch it. What if I try to start agile user? It says permission denied. Why do you think we are getting permission denied? Reason being, if you exit from this SFTP, we are currently logged in with testing as such user. So you can think like this: from whatever user you are authenticating to SFTP, and then you're downloading stuff, and so you only have access to the same directory or location where you have currently logged in. So if you try something else, then it will not work for you, and you will not be having access to the respective locations. So this case, why you got permission denied? Because testing as such user does not have access to home directory of Star Agile. If you want to download into home directory of Star Agile, you should first access the home directory of Star Agile, which means you should switch user to Star Agile, and then from here you should access SFTP. Okay, now let's go to uploads, and if you say get, I want to download test.txt to my home directory, and then it will work because you are currently logged in with the Star Agile, which definitely has access to its home directory, and that's how you should be able to download it. What if you want to put something on the remote location? You have already made some changes in the text file, and now let's say first we exit the connection. You have added this file test.txt. Now let's append something to, let's read what this file has it. Just one line called test. This is a test file. I want to append changes. Okay, and let's save it. Now again go back to SFTP. Okay, now say put Star Agile /test.txt to where? Inside uploads. /home/Star Agile, and then this should be, or this should work. Okay, you are unable to put it. Let's try to do this. Let's see if there is any other file, test directory. Let's try to put /home/staragile test.txt to, for some reason we are getting permission denied. The reason may be because if you see this, let's switch to SFTP user and let's try to see the permission that uploads. So currently on this directory, SFTP user should be able to write anything, read, write and execute, it has it. And similarly for this also you should be able to do read write. So this is just a user name and the group ID. So it should work actually. Let's try with from this machine and see. Staragile testing as such. Let's do this. Cat /testing1.file test file. Let's try to SFTP the rate put okay. I'm able to put test1.txt to the uploads location, uploads directory. So this must be something restricting us to upload because of the permission issues. So we should check that actually. Maybe it already had this file. So I'll try this. Let's do this. Let's rename this file test.txt to test_test.txt. Okay. Now let's connect again. And then let's try to put it test. Yeah, now it's able to do that. Maybe because this file was already present and it was unable to have the permissions to open this file. Definitely not, because only SFTP user and the root or the group has the access to edit anything in the uploads directory. So now once I change or rename the file test_test_txt and then using put command, you can upload anything onto the remote server. So this is how you can basically download and upload via SFTP. Now let's you can use bye command also to say goodbye from the SFTP shell, and then it'll exit your connection and then you can come back, or you can execute exit command. That also works the same way. So we have seen SCP and SFTP. Now let's talk about Rsync, what Rsync does. So Rsync basically tries to sync the remote local to remote or remote to local, the directories and files, everything. So usually with SCP we can just upload files and stuff, but what about directories, right? So Rsync can help you with that as well. So let's try to see some examples. First, let's say files. So from local to remote, what are files we have? Let's say we have this file. I'll create another file, another .text. This is another file. Okay, now let's try to do rsync another .text, and then staragile @staragile. Okay, so let's see, this is my server. Now switch back to Staragile user. See, here also I have Staragile user, and here also on my server has star agile user. This is the IP address. You can just make a difference by this IP address. All right, so this is my server. Now in the home directory, you see these are the files which are present. Now I want to sync another .txt onto the home directory of star agile user to the server machine. So I can just execute rsync command, and you see the output here. So there is another file called another.txt already synced with the rsync command. So if you read this, you can just sync this. So that is how you can sync the files actually. Now let's try to do some sync the directories or folders. So first let me create a folder called star agile. Okay, now I will try to sync this. Let me just create another file, test.txt. okay, rsync -bz. So this will basically zip it up and then sync it. V is for verbose, R is for all types. So rsync -ebz, then star agile, and then @and /home /star agile. Okay, so it says that sending incremental file list. What all files it's sending inside test star agile? It's sending test.txt. So now let's do ls here, and when you do ls, you see star agile directory, which was not having before, has been synced via rsync command. So rsync can help you to sync basically the directories and files both. So if you see star agile, it has test.txt, so it has synced the complete folder itself, so this will help you. For example, the real use case I'll talk about, people use AWS CLIs where they would want to on any EC2 machines server, they want to sync the directories or they want to download the directories. So they can use rsync command for syncing the chunks of directories or bulk load of directories. So you can do bulk uploads and downloads via rsync command. So it will help you to sync basically from the remote machine. So that is the advantage of syncing using rsync command. And about these options, you can anyways read in rsync man rsync. It will tell you for all the versatile options, whatever it is available for rsync command, so that you can read it. All right, so now let's talk about syncing from a remote location to local. So here also I'll create, let's say, remote location. Okay, okay, now let's do this rsync star agile @10.211.55.12/home/ star agile / remote location, where you want to sync it to the present directory. So now if I do this, I will be able to see remote location has already been synced from the remote server, and if I list the content, I should be able to see the content which is a file, remote file, which we created here, and then present it in the remote machine. So that is how you can download and upload via rsync, basically syncing from the remote to local and local to remote. So that is one way. So if we talk about the differences between all three, SCP is basically useful for just to copy the files. You can sync it from the remote to the local machine and from local to remote. Other way, rsync is basically being used for files and directory. It's kind of advanced version of what sync can do. Then we talked about SFTP, which can give you some sort of an interactive shell kind of a prompt where you can list down the directories and you can list the files, and then based on the choices you can download or you can upload the files whatever is present on the remote and local machines. So that is about the syncing the files. Now let's talk about the firewalls, and which is very important because when we talk about servers and services, so definitely we can restrict users to access those services and stuff. So how do you do that? You can use firewall to set it up. So first we will see UFW. So if you don't have that UFW package, so let me just see if I have it or not. So I'll just try to start or my systemctl sudo UFW enable. So it says UFW command not found. So why it says command not found? Because it does not have a package of UFW itself, which requires in order to enable it. So for that you need to download that package. So staragile on this machine, we are trying to download the package sudo apt install UFW. Okay. Let's download this package. Okay, now once the package is downloaded, after that you can enable. Okay, so it says firewall is active and enabled for on system startup. Okay, so enable means whenever system will boot up and then start up again, automatically this firewall will be enabled. If you want to check the status, you can just run command sudo UFW and then status. It will tell you it is active and it has currently these rules. Basically on port number 22, action which is deny from anywhere. So anywhere means anywhere in the world, anybody tries to access to this port, the action is denied. That is the first rule. So this first rule takes preferences on all the bottom rules. So in this case, if you try to access from anywhere in the world to this port 22, you should be able to get the deny message. So that is how you can see the status of it. Now let's talk about how do you enable the rules and stuff. So you can say sudo UFW allow SSH. So you can update the rule and then you can see what it says. So it says 22 port TCP version 6, it's allowed from anywhere. Also this is anywhere allowed from anywhere, but since this rule is on top, this will take the preferences. So you have to delete this rule, then only this rule will be in the preference, and then after that it will be applied. Okay, now how do you allow the specific services basically? So for that you can use command sudo UFW allow, let's say Apache full. So this will basically allow for service called Apache. It's a web services, the Apache package. So whatever the Apache has it will allow for IPv6 and IPv4 all from anywhere in the world. So anybody can access Apache and then should be able to use it. So this is a firewall rule. So let me just show, let's try to do SSH. Okay, I am able to do the search. Reason being, there might be some iptables rules also updated. That's why it is getting allowed to access on the port number 22. Otherwise, if we look at just the UFW firewall, then it has a rule which says on port 22, anywhere in the world somebody will try to access it, it should get denied, right? Okay, so now let's talk about how to allow a traffic from a specific service. So from specific service you can use command sudo UFW and then allow from IP address. So this is how you can allow from anywhere from this IP address. So only this IP address, if you initiate any connection from this IP address to any of the service on this server, the access is allowed only for this IP address. Other than this IP address, everything is blocked. So for the students who are in the colleges and they have a firewall and stuff, right, they might be restricting certain websites to access it, right? So the reason being that the firewall rules are enabled. So for example, I'm just trying to explain here that only restrictive IP addresses must be having access to those particular web services to access it. Otherwise, none other people should be able to access it. So those are the things. How do you do that? So via UFW, if you have access to the server, you can just review the logs, and also the UFW if it is there enabled. Otherwise, some other utility to enable the firewall. So there are various firewalls, open firewalls also available, so people can use that. So these are the rules. How do you set it up? Also, not for the Apache full. Instead of that, you could have set for particular website to access denied. Otherwise, for all other websites, access allowed. So those are the changes that you can do anytime. So it's based on the understanding of what we are trying to do here is what I'm explaining. You can just take a reference from Google, and then for a particular website, you can anytime allow or deny. You can just play around with it. After this IP address, we can see how to allow the IP and the port. So we can say UFW allow from, let's say, IP address .0.100 to any port. So now you see from this IP, anybody from this IP comes to 80 port. So previous rule had anywhere, which means to any of the port, but now this is to respective to only 80 port. So 80 port, only this IP is allowed. So that's how you can set up the rules. And if you want to deny, so you can do this sudo UFW deny 23. So this will add a rule 23 deny from anywhere, and for IPv6 also from anywhere it's denied. Now let's check the verbose, which means the messaging, how it does. So you can say status and then verbose command. This will show you some detailing way of what does this mean: deny incoming, allow outgoing, disabled routed. So the profiles, and it is explaining deny in from anywhere, action, and then to. So this is how it is explaining the rules in details actually. So with the verbose option, you can read it like this. After that, let's talk about some connection limit. So usually what happens is in the industry, any giant company or organizations, they have websites login, and they always have a rate limiting. Rate limiting means they restrict certain number of connections to be established. After that, any connection which comes to, it has to wait, or it will directly get 429 error, which means the rate limiting. That means the server is only capable enough to handle that much of request. If it goes beyond it, then it will basically deny the request. So you can set up the rate limiting this way. The way how do you set it up is, you can say UFW sudo w then limit as such. You can set up that limit for the SSH. So SSH limit in action will be enabled. So this will add up a limit there. Also after that, so this will also prevent the brute force attack, which means that if somebody wants to connect to the server and it is trying to do hit and trial method to break the passwords and stuff, so this will be limit that user particularly to restrict from accessing it, because we have this rule set up. So this helps to restrict the brute force attack as well. Now let's talk about how do you delete that rule. So sudo you can delete it via numbers actually. So UFW status and then whatever the number, let's say 22. So say number. Okay, so now there are a number of rules which are there. So you see there are a number of rules 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10. I want to delete delete number 1, okay, which is deny in from anywhere to port number 22. Yes, yes. Now let's see the status. So that rule will be gone, which was there before. It has deleted. Now the first rule has become limited. So that's how you can delete the rule from the UFW firewall as well. How do you reset UFW? You can just hit command UFW reset. This will reset everything for you. Okay. But before resetting it, always make sure to store the backup, because it's always recommendable to store the backup. It's not just the 5 or 6 rules are being created for the industry purpose, right? So usually companies have thousands of rules or more than that as well be created depending on their use cases. So it's always good to have a backup so that you always can take the reference from the backups and then you can restore it. This is the way to do this. So it always take a backup and then does the reset. Once you do the reset, after that you see the service is inactive and then there is no set rules currently set up for UFW. Okay, and if you want to disable it, so you can just say UFW disable, and after that firewall will be stopped and then nothing will be there. So, and it will be disabled from the startup. So whenever system will boot up, it will automatically disable the service. So then we will talk about iptables. So iptables is another way of setting up a complex rules. UFW, whatever we discussed, it's kind of a front end of iptable. So whenever you make changes to that rule, the rule will be stored in the iptables. It's a table kind of a thing which stores these kind of a rule. So UFW is kind of a front end, you can understand this way. So let's talk about iptables. How do you set up the complex rules? So I'll show some examples. How do you do that? So for that there is a command called iptables command. Iptables -L can list you what all rules which are there, and it requires sudo permission. So that's how you can list down all the rules if it has any rules. So currently we see there are a lot of rules. Basically it accepts the connection. It's kind of a little tricky to read as well, kind of a complex thing, but I'll explain this way. Target means basically on what target you want to achieve what. So TCP packet, if it comes from anywhere, which is the source, and goes from anywhere to destination, what it does is it basically for this target it accepts the connection. So SSH is the target here, and then it accepts the connection to do what? It is accepting all the connections. So let's say if you read or list, there is another options you can use in iptables -L-v verbose and then -n. This will list down all the options and packet chains and stuff, what are the bytes it transfers and source and destination. Basically this will show the verbose way of detailing in the sense like what is the IP address, a range, CIDR format also it says. When we say anywhere, which we saw here, right, for SSH anywhere to anywhere, so this anywhere is nothing but 0.0.0.0/0. So you see here the same thing is being displayed over here from source to destination. So all these rules are anywhere to anywhere. So that is how you can check it. After that, let's try to set up some rule. iptables -a input operation. We want anything which comes in to TCP. Destination port is, let's say, 22 or let's say 23. What do you want to do? Reject everything. Okay. So now you see sudo iptables So currently on port 23 everything is rejecting from everywhere. So it's rejecting all the packets. What if we try to set up on 22? So on 22 it's accepted. Let's set this rule input on 22 reject, and then we will read this. So currently there are two rules created. One is with accept, which was created previously, already existing because I was playing around before that. And then now the another rule that we have created just now, it is basically rejecting any packet which comes, any TCP packet which comes on destination port, which is 22. So the action is rejection. It will reject all the packet whatever comes up. So but since this rule take preferences, this rule will not be active, but if we make the changes, it will be active again. So it will go on the top one and then take the preferences on this. After that, let's try to see how do you basically see the NAT tables. So iptables -t NAT -l. So this is how you can see the NAT tables. If you have any NAT tables rules updated, so it will show you. So NAT is nothing but a network address translation, which is also another networking term. You can just read about that. But if you want to see the table for the NAT tables, if there are any rules created, you can see it like this. What if you want to allow any connection on port number 80? So you can set, let's say, sudo iptables input -p TCP -d port destination port 80, and then -j accept. Okay, so this will accept all the 80 port connections. That's how you can read it. Okay, let's talk about dropping all the incoming connections. So you can just iptables -p input and then drop. So it will drop any connection which comes. This firewall rule will be active and will drop all the incoming connections. So which we are not going to do this because we will not be able to access this machine anyways after that if we set up these rules. But for your information, this is how you can set up the drop rules. After that, let's say how do you allow the established connections. So iptables -a input -p TCP, all the TCP incoming connections. State, what all state only established, released, accept. So that is how you can set up this. Related, establish, maybe it is sudo iptables -a input -m state -m state established, comma related, accept. It says state requires a list of with no spaces. Okay. Yeah, that's how you can set it up. So you can just read this rule again. All the connections from anywhere for those states related and established, it will allow the connections to set up. If you want to save the iptables rule, you can just save it via sudo iptables save command. So this command will help you save all the rules. Where you want to save it, let's say any test file or any file, any rule file, any location, you can save it like this. If you want to restore, you can do this. iptable restore command is there, which will take the input from the save rule file and then it will update the iptable entries. So that's how you can restore the rules. After that, we can see some persistent packages. How do you set up this persistent rule, which are not really required because those are the complex things. But if you do that, you need a persistent package to be installed. So you can install it via apt get and install command, which will allow to download that persistent package, and then you can set up a persistent rule. Let's try to see how do you redirect the traffic port forwarding via IP tables. So you can do like this: NAT-A pre-routing, and then -p TCP -d port 80 redirect. You don't have to remember the exact command. You can just take a reference anytime. It's just fine. I'm just trying to tell you that this is how. There are a lot of options and stuff that you can play around with IP tables. You can set up the rerouting, and you can do a lot of networking stuff and examples of the firewall things, right? So that is how you can just set it up. Yeah, so that's about it. So if we talk about the differences between IP tables and UFW, which one is good? So if you are a new user, so you can start with using UFW, which is nothing but a front end, capability of using IP tables. So whatever the changes you do there, it will be allowed for the IP tables, and then you are able to play around with it. If you are already existing using the UFW, then you can go with the IP tables, or if you want to create any complex rules, though it's always recommendable to use the IP tables in that case. So yeah, that's about in this chapter.
If you want to learn Linux and get certified from IBM, click on this link given below in the description. That's a wrap for this chapter. I'll meet you in the next episode of this Linux series.